What is up, and welcome to opening night here at Joe's Tavern. Belly up to the bar, have a drink, and join the conversation along with us. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Joe Farsing, lifelong Greater Cincinnati resident. I have a lovely wife, two mostly great kids, but we know how that goes. I cover the Bengals, for 2 seasons on the Riverfront Podcast Network. I'm on, do a lot of episodes with Strawberry Ice. So those of you that are watching from Strawberry Ice's platform, welcome, join. Hopefully you guys enjoy it and join me here week after week. Socials here at X, I am at Joe's Tavern Show. Any questions, comments, thoughts, anything like that, Joe's Tavern Show at gmail.com, youtube.com at Joe's Tavern Show. You guys get the picture of what we're doing here. So obviously with the name of Joe's Tavern, there will be a lot of Simpsons references at some point. My favorite show of all time, but today we're going to keep it relatively straightforward. No Moses Lack, no crank phone calls or anything like that. We're not looking for Amanda hug and kiss or anybody like that. So a couple bullet points here real quickly before we get to our guest, which I'm so insanely excited to get to speak with here. Spring training, Reds pitchers and catchers are reporting and going. Position players reported today. It is Wednesday on the 12th on this. I know it'll probably be released on Thursday. Reds are predicted to finish anywhere between 71 and 78 wins, depending on the projection system. Pacoda has them on the low end. I think that's incredibly low. They won 77 last year with so many injuries, everyone having down years, and yet somehow they're going to finish worst. We'll see, and we'll talk about that later as we get deeper into spring training. Super Bowl is over. We are now in the NFL offseason. Bengals have one of the most crucial, and I know we say this a lot, every offseason is crucial when you have Joe Burrow and a franchise quarterback and Super Bowl aspirations. This is the biggest offseason that they've had since Joe Burrow joined the organization. So many balls in the air, so many moving parts. You have guys, there are questions whether it's worth to pay 2 receivers top of the room or top of the position value, and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Jamar's getting his money. We shall see what they do with T. There's the Trey Hendrickson question, extend him, trade him. And then today, Jermaine Pratt went public with his trade demands to go. So it's going to be incredibly interesting. We still have a few weeks before the Underwear Olympics, the Combine starts, and then free agency starts a few weeks after that. And then in April is when the draft is. So, we've got plenty of time to discuss these topics, but just a couple quick bullet points while we get going here. So that being said, I am incredibly proud and excited to introduce my first ever guest, the first patron here at Joe's Tavern. It is filmmaker, Cincinnati historian, Cam Miller. Cam, how are you, sir?
I am splintastic. How are you doing?
Nerves are on edge. Number one, my first episode here. And secondly, as I was telling Cam off air, my son, who's also named Cam, got his temporary permit today and drove a couple times, and he did fine. He did a very good job, but it's nerve-wracking as hell. You've got older kids, right?
Yeah, I have adult children. I mean, one still lives here, and then I've got one that just broke his leg actually going to work, and so he was living here during the holidays, and he moved away. But been down that road, man. I know exactly what you're going through.
What was that like on your end?
Yeah, it's funny because for me, when I started driving, it was my dad had a old Ford Econoline, one of those. That was the family car, right? Was the Econoline with the TV,
big huge vans.
The antenna, up top, like it was a limo from the 80s, like I was strolling around like Miami Vice. Yeah, that was the first car that I ever drove. So I took my permit test night. You talk about kids today, man, they don't know. Try to drive one of those bad boys in parallel park. That I had to learn in that. So I always gave my kids, hell about that. But it's funny because, today everything's at their fingertips. I mean, the cars are so easy to drive that it doesn't deal, like you were saying before, it's a matter of pressure, right? Foot, gas, pedal, getting that feel. And once you get that feel, you're good to go.
Yeah. I had to learn, I learned my first car was a manual. So that learning how to drive and then dealing with a stick shift, and we lived on a pretty steep hill. Our neighborhood, like our house was on a pretty steep hill. So backing out of the driveway down the hill and then having to go, I mean, it felt like it was a 60-degree incline. It was probably, I mean, it was a subdivision. It wasn't, not like I'm scaling Everest, but that was fun. I took the test in my mom's 89 Chrysler LeBaron, which had a front end.
Nice.
Like the engine compartment was about 13 feet long. Those were fun.
Nice.
My wife has me beat though, because she drove her dad's car. It had no power steering and only one side view mirror because it was old. It was built before the both side mirrors were mandatory. So I think she's got me beat a little bit. So
that's brutal. But I mean, if you go easy, right?
Sorry, I lost you there for a second.
No problem. I'm here. Whether that's a good thing or not shall remain to be seen here. We'll see.
Right, exactly. But I have faith. My son's a smart kid, good kid, and just don't do anything dumb. Okay, that's the end of the story.
That's it. Yep, that's it.
I spent a lot of time working in the funeral industry. I've seen what happens. Don't be dumb.
Yeah, don't be stupid. Right.
So, anyway, on to you and your career. So what exactly is your title with the Reds Hall of Fame and Museum?
Well, I do the audio and visual. Yeah, okay. It's funny because I started out there as a full-time employee. I used to call myself, I was a carny barker, right? I had to go pick up the baseballs in the strike zone, that kind of thing. Step right up, 3 pitches. It was that kind of what the Hall of Fame was back in the early days, which was 20 years ago, believe it or not. That was, I worked there. I was in between other things. I was like, yeah, it'd be fun to work there. But then I started moving up and I was the education manager. But one fateful day, I had always done film. I did film in school. I did film when I was a kid. They said, we need a quick film for the legends live on. We want to get all of the Hall of Famers and we want to put them on a loop because we had this TV mounted to the ceiling with the VCR DVD combo on it. You know how those were back in the day. And they just wanted to put a DVD in there, right? And loop it. So when patrons were coming in, they had something to watch. Yeah. Besides like the Jerry Springer show or whatever, right? Because that was just TV was on. So, and this is kind of before MLB Network. So there was really nothing to play on there except daytime TV. So I said, sure, I can do that. And I made this, quick loop of all of the Hall of Famers with, the Ken Burns effect of the panning across. And it was a blast to do, but they liked it. The next thing you know, I'm doing an exhibit film, the 1919 World Series. I got to go through the archives. I mean, that was my first real, okay, I'm doing this now on the side for them. Because remember, I'm education manager, but they kind of got me good, right? Because they weren't paying me as a filmmaker at that time. They were just paying me my education manager salary. But they were like, hey, could you do this? But then I decided to branch out on my own. I did my own thing and started Cam Miller Films because I was getting so many requests because people come to the Hall of Fame and say, hey, this is great. So I started my own thing. And again, I'd always done it. It wasn't like I was just, brand new to how to do it. It's different though, when you're doing something for the Hall of Fame, the pressure's on, right? So people come in there, that's what they see. You have to represent, the Reds and the Hall of Fame well. So I was really, 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 I learned a lot that first year. But that's kind of how I got my start doing that stuff. But then, of course, what happens? You do one film, then you want to do another, and then you want to do another. But I mean, I'm so blessed that I was able to keep them as my number one client, right? So I do work for them, and for 20 years I have been the audiovisual guy of the Hall of Fame, but I'm able to do everything else I want to do, right? As an independent filmmaker. So I'm not beholden to, just doing things for them. It's just, but how cool is that, right? I get to do my lifelong dream, but also get to do other things for the Bengals and all that. So, man, being a filmmaker, it's a trip. I love it. I love every second of it.
So, like, starting out, since the Reds was kind of your first gig for filmmaking with an organization that's so dedicated to its history,
right?
how, like, what do you think that's better, having that pressure, knowing that, like, this is, you know, especially the Reds Hall of Fame Museum is just amazing. All the displays, all of, like, every but literally every nook and cranny there is just stuff filled with so much information of Reds baseball, and then just baseball in general.
Right.
Do you think now that, you know, you're a little bit down the road, that it's better to have had something more pressure? Or would you like to have eased in something, you know, just kind of testing out, instead of, yeah, people are like, thousands of people are going to be walking through your every day on a game day.
Right. Well, think about that, right? My first film publicly, not something I was doing for my, you know, my kids or myself at home or, you know, school, was through people coming in by the, like you said, the thousands. And that was my, talk about putting your foot in the fire. Like, that was it. It had to be precise. And I am so glad that's the way I did it, because it taught me how to do things right and do things through research and making sure that I had a way to do things, and I still do. I'm not the flashy. If you're coming to me for a hype video, you're coming to the wrong guy, right? That's just not my thing.
Yeah.
I am such a down basics. The story speaks for itself. The bells and whistles are fine. You can pepper them in, but basic, you want to grab people's attention. Now, this was something that I had to learn. I mean, again, learning how to do it on the job. Literally, think about this. I taught 4 classes. This is an example. My first film, The Legends Live On, all of the Hall of Famers, 60, 70, whatever it was at the time. And I had to do a quick bio on them, and then it looped around. It's about 10 minutes. And I taught 4 or 5 classes that day, ran home, started working on the film, get up at 5 a.m, go back to the ballpark, teach more classes, come home, spend 5 or 6 hours making that film. And again, this was 2005, 6. So the technology starting to get better, but it wasn't like today where you can make a film on an iMac in 10 minutes. Yeah. So it was so different back then. And plus having to burn it to a DVD that would play up there and loop, and so bizarre now to think about. But that was doing it that way, under the gun, with no sleep, with 18 cups of coffee, and just walking in. Yeah, man, here's your DVD. And for it to be good, that was the thing, man. It had to be good. But if that first one wasn't good, they weren't going to give me the 1919 exhibit film. They weren't going to give me Crosley Field Remembered. They weren't going to give me the dozens and dozens I've done over the years. It's just been such a beautiful relationship. And I'm so happy that I get to do this for a living, and I'm friends with all those guys, right? But at the same time, I don't have to watch what I say on Twitter and X, because they can't tell me to do nothing. I'm an independent filmmaker. Now, I've been called to the principal's office a few times, but I am so happy that I get to do what I do. It's such a blessing, and I love it. To answer your question, yes, it was the perfect way to do it. Go in, feet to the fire. This is it. You're gonna, and not only fans, think about all the players that come in there too. So you're having players come in, do autographs or whatnot, and they're seeing that. So it was, you better get this right.
That I have a question for you. You did the 1919 documentary.
Yeah.
Take the gambling out of it, and if it were played straight up, do you think the Reds had a chance?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you look at the teams, the White Sox were a good team. I just think that the Reds, and of course that is the hypothetical, right? But the Reds, top to bottom, they were just really, really good. And they never got their due, because everybody's first sentence is, yeah, but gambling. Yeah, but Shoeless Joe. Yeah, but Cicotti. Yeah, but what really, really sold me, I mean, I was on the fence, I'm not going to lie, for a while. It wasn't until I went through the archives and listened to probably 18, 19 hours of Ed Roush when he was interviewed for the Glory of Their Times book. And the Glory of Their Times book, of course, he's telling his story. It's, written, and it's, whatever it is, 7, 8 pages in the book. But I got to go through all of the raw audio. So just the tape recorder and him and the interviewer, Ritter, talking. Yeah. And listening to him tell the stories and repeat everything and having it be so accurate. You're like, wow, this dude's memory, right? And he was right. And he was like, yeah, we would have kicked their ass. Like they were so good. I mean, and again, it's hard because of the gambling you're never going to know, but that lineup, man, and that pitching staff, unbelievable. It was really incredible.
I mean, Ed Roush, Hall of Famer, he was only the second best hitter that year at a 146 OPS plus. Heine Groh with a bottle bat at a 149. Yeah, I mean, that was a team that mashed. It frustrates me because, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the Reds, yes, they've been around legitimately for 150 years now. I'm not counting 1869 because we know better.
Thank you.
Stolen.
You know my feelings on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a nice story. It's a neat story, but that team disbanded it and then became what's now the Atlanta Braves. Let's be clear here.
Thank you.
The Reds history is, it's people believe what they want to believe, and that's fine. I have bigger battles to fight, but
that's a whole other podcast. I know.
Exactly. The Reds aren't They've had a ton of great players and a ton of great seasons and history, but they've only won 5 championships in the 120 years. I mean, was it the 1903 was the first World Series? They didn't play it 2 years, so what? 100? Right. Yeah, 120 World Series have been played, and the Reds have 5 total. And there were only 16 teams for the longest time. Their first one is tainted, and it's just assumed that the White Sox would have won it like it's David and Goliath. They were pretty evenly matched teams. If you look at it, and how I don't know how accurate WAR is when it's calculated 100 years after it was played, but they were the teams were pretty even. I think the White Sox were a stronger pitching team, but the Reds didn't have the glory that was Joe Jackson, who doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. He took the money.
I mean, it's
but it's one of the 5 titles are completely dismissed. Like, oh, it's the White Sox title they just gave. Like, don't quit saying that the Reds won. You don't. How do we know how much that the White Sox were actually faking it? So you just go off of what happened? No, that's one of the Reds' 5 World Series. Let's don't take it away from that.
And it's also tough because we don't have all of those games to watch on YouTube, pitch by pitch, right? We only have a few bits. Yeah. Yep. You can look at stats, you could paper, but you only have a few clips of live action that you can see there where you're like, I don't know, it's fishy. And I remember when we were doing the film, we came across, this was right when some of that footage was being discovered. So it was really awesome to go through and see. But you're right. I mean, would they have won fair and square? I have to say yes. Biased, of course, but just the way that team was constructed, and it's unfortunate, like you were saying. I mean, and then they were not that great in the 20s. I mean, they didn't have the greatest seasons, so it was like that was a one and done thing. But what are you going to do? The documentary was fun to make. It was fun to listen to Ed Roush talk for hours, and some of his content is not safe for work, school, church, you name it. It was rough around the edges because he was an old-time ball player. But I learned so much doing that film. It was my first feature, I guess you could say, because it played in an exhibit space. But the coolest thing about that film wasn't all that. That was awesome. Don't get me wrong. And the pictures, it was that we discovered sheet music that was played in Cincinnati bars. Root, root, root for the Reds.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It hadn't been heard since 1919, right? Nobody. I mean, they didn't record it. I was given the sheet music, and I played it on the piano, and we recorded it. And it was the soundtrack of the film. So that was one of the big deals they made about when they did a write-up in the Enquirer or whatever it was about how I was able to bring back the sheet music for a song written about the Reds in 1919. And the first time it had ever been heard since then, because again, it wasn't radio, there wasn't CDs. So that was fun. That was one of those cool moments where you're like, man, how cool is my job? But my friend, it got so much better as the years went on.
So I remember, as a kid, I mean, my brothers and I were gigantic Reds fans. I mean, obviously, they were born in 78. I was born in 80. So we grew up in the shadow of the big red machine. But I was 7 years old and we got a Reds documentary official history of the Reds that came out in '87.
Oh, yeah.
And we absolutely destroyed that tape. We watched it so much on VHS. Those only took so many playthroughs before the tape just got degraded. But I remember watching it, and I don't remember the historian that they interviewed on this. And again, this is almost 40 years ago. But he said absolutely the Reds were the better team and should have won. So at the age of 6-7 years old, whenever I first watched that, I already had the mindset, the Reds are getting screwed by history, believing that that they stole the World Series, as it were. So
right, I agree 100%.
What was there really anyone in terms of like a mentor or anything, since you kind of just got handed this? Was there anyone here that to kind of help guide you, or how, in terms of like peer review type?
Right, and that's the thing, man. Like, as a kid, I was, of course, just an unbelievable Star Wars diehard fan, like hardcore, read all the comics, and of course, you watched the movies in the theater, and then you were done until they came out on cable a year later. I mean, it wasn't like we went to the movie theaters and then came home and watched it on a bootleg. I mean, you watched it and you had to imagine that stuff, right? So you imagine what you saw after you got out of the theater. So I would come home and take my action figures and make these scenes, and I didn't have a camera yet, so I just took 100 Polaroids. I remember, like, my mom's like, "What? Why are we going through so much film?" Because I'm taking stills and all these things just in case I have a storyboard here, just in case I get to make my film. So I was
stop motion going.
Exactly. I was so obsessed with. And that's the thing. And I explain this to people when I do talks or podcasts or whatever. It wasn't that the movies were great. They were. I love Star Wars. I love the lore. I love the history of that and the way George Lucas told those fairy tales, space fairy tales. That's what they were.
Right. Yeah.
But it was the process. I fell in love with the process of filmmaking. I remember sitting with my dad and watching on PBS a documentary on the making of it. I would watch that for hours and hours and hours and hours. That was, to me, was what excited me. That's when I kind of knew that I hope one day I get to do this for a living. Not ever imagine it, because of course I wanted to be a third baseman for the Cincinnati Reds. I wanted to be the starting point guard for the Chicago Bulls. I wanted to be a Bengals wide receiver. Not going to happen. So okay, athlete, but that wasn't my path. So having this film, this creative inside of me, and then by chance, they needed something. If they just would have went to the scoreboard department and said, "Guys, make this," and they would have slapped something together and thrown it in there, I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you today, right? Yeah. Because I wouldn't have followed that. I would have just done my 9 to 5 and moved on. But that chance to do something that was, again, we still use it all to this day. I just update it every year, right? That same music, that same film we put in the lobby, and it's a little bit different now. It's automatic and it's on computers. But that whole process, for me, that was the fun part. So I never had anybody that was like in school. My mentors were not filmmakers. It was the music teacher, the band director, my history teachers especially. I had some great ones. But not only that, my childhood, at the time, I hated it. I moved around. I moved from here, Cincinnati area, at 14 to South Carolina. So I learned Civil War history in South Carolina.
Okay.
So take that for what you want, right? Yeah. But my best history teachers were down there. I go from there to Detroit, Michigan. You talk about a change of pace. As a junior in high school, my dad was a robotic engineer, right? So
little different culture from South Carolina to Motor City.
Oh my God! Especially in the late '80s, early '90s, man. But it was a culture shock. But it was, at the time, I was so ticked off because I was leaving my friends again. I was starting over again. New baseball team, but I've always followed the Reds. I got the Reds report. My mom got the Kentucky Post, Cincinnati Post mailed to the house. So every 2 days later, we would always get the Post and see the box scores and go through them. Yeah. It was such a fascinating way to grow up because I had to adapt, right? So adapting to all of these different things, I think, made me a better filmmaker. It made my creative, whatever that was inside of me, go in a million different directions rather than just be down a one-lane road. So I was able to dabble in a lot of things, which I think made me a better filmmaker because of that. Because if I just would have stayed here my whole life, I don't think I would have pursued it. I think I would have done something different. I would have worked at the factory, I had the wife and kids and done my thing, and that would have been it. But there was something about all of the places I lived, each one, I had a special person in my life that said, hey, you could do this, this is this. And I wasn't just pigeonholed into one thing. But no filmmaker per se. I just got, I watched films, and I watched Ken Burns, and I watched George Lucas, and I watched all of the people that I thought were, excellent filmmakers and storytellers. And that kind of shaped me into the filmmaker I became.
Don't hate me, but I think American Graffiti is George Lucas's best film.
I absolutely understand that, because it is so underrated, because Star Wars comes out and takes over everything.
Yeah.
Graffiti's so good. Good. You're right. It's good.
Being born when I was, I mean, the first two Star Wars movies, when did the second one came out? 80 or 81?
Yeah, Empire comes out in 80, so you're born. Yeah. And then Return of the Jedi comes out in 83, and you're 3. Yeah. You're not gonna.
Exactly. And
completely.
We had the toys because one of my dad's friends worked at Kenner, which was the cool thing.
Okay.
Like, the company that makes all these awesome toys is, right here in Queensgate or West End, or wherever the hell it technically was.
Right.
Now the action figures that we had, I'm sure, are worth thousands if we, hadn't have done what, crazy ass boys would do. But
if you go to 45th Street right now, Latonia, Kentucky, and you take a backhoe down there, you will probably find $4,256 million worth of toys down there, because we buried them all. That's what we did. We would play the Great War, and then we would just put dirt on them. And I'm sure there's so much out there. Oh my God.
No, you kind of answered this before we even started recording here, but how much research is really kind of required? If you're doing, like, most of the documentaries are kind of, right around 30 minutes or so. How much actual research and just culling all the multimedia that's needed?
Well, that's the thing. It depends. Like, if I'm doing a Reds thing, and it's a paying gig, and I'm doing something for the Reds, they've got all the stuff there, so it's not as hard, right? Because they've already got everything there. Every now and then I have to go out my own. I have to find things, but for instance, my Riverfront Remembered film that was my passion project, financed by me and from generous gifts from my mother, who helped finance it. But it was she always is there for me. My mom, shout out to my mom. She's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, she'll go on eBay and say, hey, what about this for your film? I'm like, of course, I want that 1970s authentic Reds jacket. I don't know.
Moms know that crap. Like, they understand.
They know it.
Like, they can make that connection. Like, you'll totally look past something and we'll come up with something. My wife does some of that stuff with our kids. I'm like, I would never think of anything like that. It's
right.
disheartening. We'll put it that way. I try to, try to be thoughtful and conscientious, and like, nah. We got nothing.
Yeah, I get it, man. I get it. But it's like, and that's the thing. It's like, when I do my films for the Reds, I have all that stuff there. But when I do films or passion projects, it takes a little longer, and I go down rabbit holes, and it's easy to get down to places. And again, the one thing that I always tell people, I don't have a team. K. Miller Films isn't a team. I got a shirt for my family one year that said K. Miller Films, and on the back it said Department of One. Because I finances, shoot the thing, produce it, edit it, control freak, maybe you can say that, but it's just because I know what I want.
Sure.
And
your vision.
And I get, it's my vision, and I don't have to buy music. I compose the music for all my films. So it's my property. I get to, do whatever I want with it.
Yeah.
It's a blessing and a curse, because it's also a lot more work, right?
Sure.
But there's nothing better than researching. Like, I'm doing research now for some projects that are so awesome and cool, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours, 14, 15-hour days sometimes. And it's a lot of work, but it's one of those things where I love it so much. I will get down and deep into something, and I'm like, 6 hours passed. I guess I'm supposed to eat today, right? Isn't that what I better eat? I love it. I'm so passionate about it, and I don't want to stop. And I hope Lord willing, I get to do this the rest of my life. I love it.
And you do a fantastic job, so I don't see any reason why the well will dry up for you. Touched on a couple projects real quickly. First one, and this one was personal to me, and just following you when it was coming out just a couple months ago. The Magical World of Johnny's Toys. We had a Johnny's Toys in Milford. Getting that card in the mail every year right, a couple weeks before your birthday. My birthday's in the middle of August, so right around the end of July, getting that card in the mail with my name. I mean, you don't get a lot of mail, sent to you specifically to your name at like 5, 6, 7 years old, and just having that little rinky-dink key and like it's time to go down there and pick out a toy. So there was a Toys R Us. I grew up in Milford, Miami Township. There was Toys R Us I don't remember when that was even built, but it was an Eastgate 20 minutes away. There was a KB Toys in Eastgate Mall, but we've never stepped foot in there. We always just went to Johnny's Toys. It was the local place, and it was just the coolest place. I can, to this day, I haven't been in there. I don't even remember when that store specifically shuttered, like, but within the past 15 years or so, and I probably haven't been in there since the mid 90s when I was, if hell, probably even earlier than that when I was still a kid. But I can still, that layout, walking in the doors and knowing the castle was right there on the hard left. There were bikes just past that and towards the back wall. It's just a magical, and you captured it perfectly. I do have to ask, in the beginning, where were you able to find a key in the door? Like from the, did you have a key, and did you have to search hard to find the specific door?
No, I was, again, a stroke of luck. I moved when my dad passed away, I moved from a house in Dayton, Kentucky to Taylor Mill, Kentucky, Latonia, Kentucky, really. We're right there where the original flagship station was, right?
Sure.
And I had always thought about doing something, because I'd pass by the old store site all the time. Obviously, when I'd ride my bike, take a walk, that's where as a kid, that's where I would go. I could still smell it, the plastic. I can still taste it. I can sense it. And I was like, somebody should do a documentary on that. Well, I had some time between projects. So I'm like, I could probably pull this off. Who do I contact? Well, I went down to my favorite coffee house, and it's called the Roost here in Latonia. And I know the owner well, Billy. She's great. She's like, oh, I talk to the Martin family all the time. Like, the Martin family, that's who owned Johnny's Toys. Yeah. And I got in contact. I put some things out on Facebook. Hey, I'm doing a film. I go over to Tom Martin's house, who is the son of Johnny, the Johnny's Toys. And I go to he's like, I'm going to show you some things. I might be able to help you with this film. I open up his shed door. And it's like this giant, warehouse type thing in the middle of Latonia, which is just odd. And there's the Mickey Mouse sign that was hanging there. There's the original doors. There's the bike shop signs. All of this stuff. It was like American Pickers. You're like, I cannot believe I'm here. And he was the sweetest, and still is the nicest. He, I think, was reluctant at first, because who's this guy? What's he going to do? Okay, is this trying to make money? I'm like, look, I'm not going to make any money on this. I do my films are for free. I finance them myself. I put them on YouTube for free. So I share the history. That's what I do. Yeah. And I think he finally realized, okay, so he's breaking out these catalogs from the 50s and 60s. I'm filming everything. I'm scanning things. And he had the original door that I went through, and I put my hand on it. And it was like this magical, like, oh my God. He hands me a key. He hands me some cards, extra ones. Here, do this. And we get to going through all this stuff. And my brother, who went to school for filmmaking, actually, which is funny enough, he wanted to be a part of the project. So I said, you know what? You should help me produce this, man. So, but I've got one thing I need you to do. We found the original Johnny the Clown mascot outfit. Would you put that on and put the makeup on as Johnny the Clown, the mascot, for my premiere? And he did, and it was unbelievable. The lady that made that costume in the 70s showed up at the premiere, and she hadn't seen that thing since 1979.
That's amazing.
So it was so cool. But yeah, the key, he had all this stuff that was just collecting dust, because he's like, it was to him. You have to remember, it was the family business to him.
Yeah.
He didn't have what you and I had, that relationship, right?
Yeah.
Where you can smell it. What that, you have that sensory overload of Johnny's.
It's a magical place.
100%. Which is why I did that first scene in the prologue there. Taking that door, putting it back magically in the location where it actually was, and then kind of starting the film off of that. It was magical, and that was kind of why I called it that. We'll never get that time back again. We'll never get toy stores like that again. There'll never be another toy store like Johnny's. And it was such an iconic place. I was so glad that we did what we did. And not only that, not only to make this film and find all the stuff out, especially with my personal connection. If you've seen the film, as you have, you know the personal connection I had with that, my father, and
Absolutely.
what I did. But all of the people that came out to the premiere, like, had stories for me. All the people that, oh, you're not going to believe this. It was between that experience of getting all those stories and then turning it into a charity event for Christmas, for the holiday season, and giving back to the community and raising $12,000. I didn't do any promotion for that.
Yeah.
I literally said on Facebook, hey, we're going to do a toy drive. The idea was I built this Johnny's Castle, and we put this Johnny's Castle at the premiere, and bring your toy. When you come to the premiere, bring a toy to fill it up. We kept it through the whole holiday. Lowe's brought stuff, Procter & Gamble, all these companies donated, and we had 5 or 6 organizations that were able to be helped at Christmas, all because I said I wanted to put things into the castle like we used to take things out when that was the premise, right?
Yeah.
As kids, we took the presents out. Let's put them back in for the kids. It was just unbelievable. The community came through. So I was able to turn a film that I just had an idea. I got some time into this 3-month process that ended up being shopping at midnight at Meijer, trying to find clothes for kids. It was the most fun I've had in a long time. And again, all because of a toy store that is no longer around, that few people remember, but the ones that do, they went goo goo gaga for it. I brought back so many people in relationships of employees. It was so fun. So fun.
And I watched it when you released it a couple months ago. Then I rewatched it again, just knowing you're coming on, and it's a magical. It just transports you right to a specific time and place.
Right, you're an 8-year-old kid again, right?
Exactly, and then God knows I miss those days. It was fun to be carefree and not have to worry about larger things going on. And I did see kind of at the end, the kind of collage at the end, you had the photo of Santa being helicoptered in. And that was the big thing, getting Santa coming in by helicopter to the Milford Shopping Center parking lot for Johnny's Toys. And that was, we didn't go there every year just because my parents were lazy. But knowing it's coming and the few times that we did get to witness it just brought back awesome memories. So
well, good. That was why I did it.
Yeah. Quickly, just want to touch on one of the other ones. Riverfront Remembered for the Reds. In the prologue, obviously you walk in and transistor radio there on the little piece of AstroTurf in the parking garage where the stadium was. Transistor radio is absolutely Riverfront Stadium. So many people having one of those and having the headphones on, or even carrying into the bathroom when you're just run to relieve yourself real quickly, and you hear several people with their radios playing Marty and Joe talking. And what was great about back then is there was no delay. It was with everything going through digital and everything. There's a little bit of a delay from you hear the crack of the bat at the same time the crack of the bat is actually happening 100 feet away from you. But then hearing Joe Nuxall's voice. It was a clip from him at the closing of Riverfront Stadium. You said your dream was to be a third baseman for the Reds. Well, I'm a left-hander named Joe that grew up in Cincinnati, so you know what I was going to do. I was destined to be a pitcher. I was going to have a Hall of Fame career with the Reds, retire to the broadcast booth, and become the young left-hander.
There you go.
Taking over from Joe Nuxall. So that's
right.
He was, and especially we were like baseball nuts. Like I love football, love basketball, hockey, whatever. Baseball, like that was the only sport I ever played growing up. We scored, like we had a scorebook, and like we would score games. Remember opening day 1988? We score the game as it's happening on TV. So that that hit me hard hearing that. Like hearing his voice, because that was one of the few times for someone I've never met when he passed, like genuinely affected me. Just for how huge of an impact. And everyone talks growing up, having having a radio under the pillow, West Coast games. They're playing San Diego or San Francisco or Dodgers, and listening to the pillow under the radio to them. Probably only make it to like the third or fourth inning before you crashed out, but still.
Right.
It was neat to note that the topping out of Riverfront Stadium happened on August 8th, 1969, which was incidentally my dad's 20th birthday. So that was kind of cool.
That's
I didn't know
crazy.
that until I saw that. But
Wow.
What is your best Riverfront Stadium memory? And whether it's in person or just at, could have even been before, before you were alive or before you were even aware.
Well, see, it's funny you say that because recently in the last few years, I had always thought that my first Reds game was 1978. The day after Pete Rose got his 3000th hit, I went to the game with my dad. I thought that was it. But then my mom said, actually, no, you were at, and she doesn't remember which game, one of the World Series games in 1975. I sat in her lap. So I was there either 3, 4, or 5, whatever game it was, and I am bound and determined to find one out. Don't think I'm not going to find out because I had a little Reds uniform on. I sat around. Do I remember it? I don't. But when I watched that, I know that I was there. It's like, what? I was at a Reds World Series during the Big Red Machine. That's, to me, blows my mind. So there's that memory. But being able to remember as a kid riding my bike from northern Kentucky, the 25 or so blocks down to the stadium, putting the bike on the lock, going in on a businessman special in the summer, and then being too tired and exhausted to pedal home. So my dad in the station wagon picks us up at the Roebling Bridge, and we throw our bikes in the back, and we drive home, and then we recreate, what we just saw down there. So those memories I will always have because it was my park, my summers, riding a bike down there. That was so much fun. I would say that my answers kind of change a little bit if you had to say the best memory. I think it would have to be 1995. I was at the Dodgers game when the Reds last won a home playoff series, right? Mark Lewis.
Yeah, that's the last series period that they won.
1995.
30 seasons.
30 seasons. Unbelievable. But that's, besides Junior coming home and the crowd, that has to be the loudest I've ever heard Riverfront when Mark Lewis hit that, grand slam. The place was shaking.
I have a cameo here by my daughter who likes to randomly put her hand in front of the camera, so I apologize for that.
Hey. So. But it adds some pizzazz. It's got to be a thing now. Now, see, now you have to have your daughter put her hand in front just for a second every show. That's got to be part of the thing.
You can see kind of her pink hair over here on the edge. I had my desk oriented the other way previously, and she'd put a laundry basket on her head and walk behind the camera. She doesn't have the room to do that now. It's an interesting way to make your on-screen debut. For me, mine is a more mundane. My favorite Reds memory was more mundane. 1988. It was in May. We were there. It was probably a kid glove game, if I'm not, if I were to guess.
Right.
Ron Robinson, Ron True Creature Robinson,
yes,
1 out away from throwing a perfect game. And
so you were there for that?
I was there. We were sitting in the green seats on the third baseline. I remembered it was Wallace Johnson pinch hit in the pitcher spot, hits a single, turned the lineup over. Tim Raines hits a 2-run home run. Ron Robinson's out, bring in John Franco, and closes the game for a 3-2 victory.
Wasn't that when Cal Daniels should have caught the ball? Should he have dove?
I don't remember. I haven't seen video from that, and it's literally only from my memory of 37 years ago.
Yeah,
I know it was pretty sharply hit. So I don't know.
Right.
Cal Daniels was born with the knees of a 45-year-old man. I mean, that guy could absolutely hit, just a fantastic natural hitter, and was done by maybe 30 because just how and playing on AstroTurf surely didn't help. But right. It's the mundane, just the basic mundane games that to me are the most vibrant. We used to go to a handful of games every year. We went to Barry Larkin's first ever start. It was we'd always go to a game around my birthday, August 12th, and his first start was I think the 15th or 16th in 1986. Right. At home, he had debuted on the road, but didn't start. He was just came in a pinch hit or pinch run or something. So
right.
I remember going to day and night doubleheaders, and my dad had a keychain that was it weighed legitimately 10 pounds. But I always thought it was cool to hold on to them, and I clipped them onto my shorts. And I remember standing up, and my shorts fell down there in the middle of the in the middle of the section.
Wow. Nice.
So, what currently? We'll move forward here. But what are you working on currently now?
Well, as you know, this is the 50th anniversary of the 1975 World Series. So I'm doing a lot of smaller films for the Reds Hall of Fame, right? My obligations to the exhibit films and the audio. So I've been working on that for a few months now since Johnny's in it. But the film I've been working on for the last year and a half or so is my film, which is going to tie in with the Reds, is the Machine in Reds Country. And this is a massive film. It's my longest, most ambitious project because it's about more than the grade 8, right? It's about the entire team, and not just the team and what they accomplished from 1970 to 79, but what it meant to be a Reds fan in the 70s. The 70s get so, as time marches on, we always talk about the grade 8 and what they did, the Big Red Machine, and then we kind of forget that decade was dominated by small market teams. Oakland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Cincinnati being the cream of the crop. And it's not.
Kansas City has some good teams. Kansas City has an expansion franchise. They had some really good teams early on.
Yep, absolutely. So you're talking about a different time in baseball. But what drew me to this project was I wanted to do something. I'm good friends with the Bat Boy, Warren Brown, who I'm going to make sure you get his information because you definitely need to talk to him as one of your guests. You will love his stories.
I would appreciate that.
He was the Bat Boy in the early part of the Big Red Machine. So you're talking 69, 70, 71, 72.
Building of the machine.
72, building the machine. He's there in the locker room when Morgan's there. His stories are so good, and he gets his job because of Pete Rose. Pete Rose, it's a great story. I'll let him tell it. You will love his stories. But I'm friends with him. We have coffee all the time, and we've been trying to do something with the Reds for this anniversary, and he's got something going on. We're working together, but I also had this film idea where I wanted to talk to fans of the era. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not around anymore. We're starting to lose these people. I wanted to focus on how important the Reds country, that whole phenomenon taking off. Think about it. There was no other team in baseball, and to this day there still really isn't, but especially in the 70s, you had over 100 radio stations that played Reds games. Yeah. Because the affiliates, because your reach was so wide. And St. Louis was the only one that was as close as the Reds were. They were kind of neck and neck. But the success of the Reds far outweighed St. Louis's success in the 70s. The big Red Machine and what that embodied and what it meant to people from West Virginia in the mountains to the city of Cincinnati to Illinois. Getting to go to these places and kind of figure out, trying to find some of the original, radio stations. Trying to find some of the fans in the bars that are still around, the dive bars. There's a few of them still left where they would go watch the game on TV if it was a national game, or they would go just go to the park and put their radios on and listen to Reds games, Marty and Joe. There was these little pockets of fandom throughout Reds country. And I wanted to make sure that this last chance, right? This 50th anniversary, it's like the last hurrah. Now, the film changed dramatically when Pete passed. And I guess I can talk about it now. We were going to have this scene where I was going to have the remaining members of the Big Grade 8 in the positions in the parking garage where they would have been at Riverfront. And the idea was to get the gloves. Tony was going to have the first base mitt. He was going to pound it. And I'd cut to Pete, who would look at his glove, and he would pound it. And then Johnny would be behind where the Riverfront, where the plate, it's there, right? You can go there and stand. It was that was going to open the film. I had the opening. It was going to be glorious. Where Joe was, we were going to have a glove there. And we were going to, I had an idea how to get around it to make it just honor him. But then when Pete passed, I realized that I don't know if we're going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So I changed directions. I decided to, you know what? We know about those guys. We know about their stories. They talk about it all the time. Let's honor them. Let's talk about them, but let's also remember the Doug Flynn's and the Daryl Cheneys, right? The guys that played for the Big Red Machine, that were important parts of it,
Sure,
but never got that due. So I've gotten to talk to some of these guys, and I've been able to kind of make this bigger picture of how important it was than the relationship between the team and what Reds country was. It's really the birth of Reds country, what we know today. Because before that, it was, of course, you listen to the radio, but the Reds weren't that great. In the 50s, they had some good teams. 61, they got the World Series. But it wasn't until the Big Red Machine that they got that national prominence, and you had fans far and wide. So telling that story in a way that's unique and different, the way I do things, it's going to look like you were flipping through the channels and you're watching something in 1979, and you click on it, and then you're watching this documentary on this team.
That'll be really cool.
Extreme measures. I've watched. You know how many episodes of Rockford Files and Mork and Mindy? I have probably watched 100 hours, my friend, just to get the vibe of the 70s and the intro. By the way, Mork and Mindy was my show as a kid, but man, that has not aged well at all.
I don't think I've watched it since probably the early 80s in syndication. So
it's not as good as it used to be. But having that, I've had to research. And again, what's great about that is that I'm doing stuff for the Reds already for their Hall of Fame exhibit. So I'm already doing that stuff. So I'm kind of able to, okay, this is for the Reds thing. I'm going to use this. I can pick out some things, and I'm doing some 70s-esque things for the Reds Hall of Fame for their exhibit. So it's, a great both worlds. I get to dabble in there. But my film is going to come out later this year, and I'm going to be putting a trailer out soon and making some announcements very, very soon about where that's at. But it's my most ambitious. It's the longest film I've done. It's the most costly, the most I put a lot of effort into making this because I know that this is it, right? A lot of these guys aren't going to be around much longer.
Yeah, they won't be around for the 60th anniversary.
And we have to do something, and it's important for Reds country. And I want to show the current Reds people that always just kind of put that in. They're grade 8 and they're statues, and that's it. They kind of just put them over here. That was a great team, 100%. And my job as a historian and filmmaker is to say, wait a minute. They were good. They were awesome. They were the greatest team ever. But there was a lot of people that helped make that happen that you never hear about. You never hear about them. And to tie it all together, that's my goal. And it's my most, like I said, my most ambitious. And I cannot wait till the premiere. We're going to do it in a theater. It's going to be amazing. I cannot wait.
I will absolutely be there. I do have someone that would be interesting to hear his perspective. I literally only know this guy's name from two moments in two different World Series. 1970 World Series against the Orioles, Bernie Carbo, and then 75 on the Red Sox, hitting the home run. So
right.
That would be an interesting, interesting perspective to hear on both sides of it. He was there at the beginning, as the machine was building, and then he's elsewhere, and then plays a key moment against them. And he hit the home run to he tied it up, I think, in Game 6, didn't he?
Yeah. So I've only watched the 75 World Series 5,000 times the last 2 months. Only because for two reasons. One, I'm trying to see if I can find me in my mom's lap. And then two, I want to soak that in because I know. But again, it's about the whole decade. But that 75 series is just so fun to watch. To watch.
The best series. 2001 series, having no dog in the fight. That was a great series. And again, I wasn't around to actually watch the 75 series. But you look at, you just look at the box scores and you see how the games played out, and they were tense as hell. Game 7, first off, half of the country thinks that Game 6, Carlton Fisk won the World Series. No,
I know.
Played the next night, and the Reds. Yeah, the Reds won in another classic. It was another.
Did you see that? It was a couple of weeks ago. MLB Network posted something on Twitter. MLB Network, mind you, affiliated with Major League Baseball. Yeah, they put Carlton Fisk wins the World Series. Okay. I know, guys, but
I know you guys have historians. Keith Costas. Yeah, Keith Costas does a great job. I'm sure he was probably Uh, steaming mad seeing that.
I know.
Quickly here till we pivot to our pop culture conversation here. Thoughts on the upcoming Reds season? And like I said at the top before I brought you on, Reds are projected to win low to mid 70s. As a fan of the team, that seems low, but also as someone who understands like statistical analysis and understands like can take a 30,000 foot view. The Reds went 75 and 85 last year with so many injuries to the pitching staff. Injuries. Right. They had Mike Ford and Nick Martini taking key at bats for the team. 77, 78 wins seems like the floor for this team. Again, they won 77 last year and were terrible for parts of the season and had so many guys in and out. What's just thoughts on what do you think the Reds are going to happen? I mean, I think Ellie's going to ascend to be a legitimate super duper supernova star. I mean, he's just so good. He's so smart, and he has the want to be amazing. I'm not crazy, right?
No, I absolutely. I'm with you 100%. And I think that the one thing that I kind of look at is that the division didn't get any better, right? Like the division
as a whole, yeah.
It doesn't look, yeah. They don't look. I mean, nobody went out. Shohei's not playing in our division, right? There was no big spenders. The Reds made decisions based upon their needs, and of course, as we all know, and personally, I know how this works because I do work for the Reds. I know the money situation. Trust me, it is what it is, and the ownership are who they are. But that being said, what they did was smart. But the key to it all, and I know I'm going to sound old school with this, and I know it's a new school world, and I'm a material girl. I understand it. Here's the thing. Terry Francona can make a bigger difference than I think that people realize because there is an automatic respect for somebody that's won.
Sure.
David Bell, understand the family history of Cincinnati. Trust me. I've met him. The nicest man, the dude was awesome. But that being said, Terry Francona is one of those guys that understands how to get the most out of his players. And when you've got this type of talent, you need somebody. Not all teams, the Dodgers don't need a great manager to be successful.
You need a caretaker.
Exactly. The Reds need
keep the egos in check, and that's about it.
100%. And this team needs a leader. They're dying for one.
Yeah.
And the comments I've read in the offseason, and just looking back at how I have to look at it from afar, plus working my butt off for this film, it's hard to keep up with everything. But I can kind of see that was probably the best move. Take the Dodgers out of the equation. Just take them out of the equation. The best move of any team was the Reds finding a manager that I never thought they'd get. I thought it was going to be Retread Central. Joe Q manager, $30,000 contract and a pack of Winstons. And he was going to go out there and he was just going to say, sign the lineup, and that's it. We needed a leader. And the Reds actually talked Terry Francona into coming back. So that tells me that he saw something. Yeah. And I think that makes a bigger difference than a lot of people realize. What's he going to do with Ellie? What's he going to do with McLean, knock on wood, stays healthy? Right. All of these things have to – now, of course, we have to have everybody have great years. You can't have a year like last year where there's injuries and then down seasons. So, I mean, the injuries are one thing, but then everybody kind of taking a step back, the Will Bensons, the Spencer Steers of the world. Yeah. You need everybody to be – and I think the pressure – is there on these guys. They're like, well, we've got Francona here. We've got to show up. It's time to play ball.
Well, and we get somebody fired.
It'll help. Yeah. Exactly. That's a good point. That's a good point.
I look at it as this year with all the acquisitions they made. A couple of trades, a handful of free agent signings. They completely raised the floor of the team.
Yeah,
they didn't go out. I mean, Austin Hayes is probably a decent pickup if he returns to what he was in 22-23. He was a solid hitter. He's not a thumper. He's not someone who's going to go out and hit 320 and 45 home runs and a 400 on base percentage and a 600 slugging percentage, but he's a
Right.
solid piece. Gavin Lux is a little bit of an upgrade over Jonathan India as a whole.
Right.
All the acquisitions they made to this to the pitching staff, they have so many options now for starting pitcher. They're not going to be running out Brett Kennedy. They're not going to be running out Carson Spears to make starts. These were guys that pitched in 2023 when the Reds were actually contending because they didn't have anybody else. So at its bare minimum, like they've completely raised the floor. I think there was still work to be done. They still need that thumper in the lineup. I don't know if they have that. I mean, ideally, Christian Encarnacion Strand is that guy. He showed it for 6 weeks in 2023, broke his wrist, and then I'm not holding last year against him. He got injured and then still apparently had issues from the break from the previous year, and basically missed the entire year from middle of May on. So, I think if things go right for them, mid upper 80s, I'm going to say they're going to go 84-78 and finish right inside for the last wild card spot.
I could see that happen. That's absolutely a really good prediction. And that's the thing that I argue with fans about all the time, whether it's on social media or down at the Hall of Fame or wherever I'm at. What you have to just understand that the Cincinnati Reds baseball club, until there's a salary cap, and who knows what's going to happen with that.
That's going to be a mess in 2 years. It's going to be a bloody fight.
Which is why I tell people, please enjoy this season and please enjoy baseball now. We don't know what's going to happen. Please don't go crazy and complain about every lineup every day and on August, Tuesday game. I can't believe he's run. Just enjoy
62 games. Take a deep breath.
Absolutely. And that's it. I tell people all the time, the Cincinnati Reds baseball club is who they are. They are not going to sign $100 million free agents. It's never going to happen. They take flyers on Austin Hayes. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So you have to just accept that fact. And a lot of people don't, and I understand the fandom, and I get it. It's a different time. But hopefully these guys pan out. The Reds did what they had to do. I mean, we can knock them for some of the things they've done in the past, but they made the moves that they were going to make, that they were allowed to make, and the parameters they had set.
Sure.
And that's all you can do is hope. And that's what it is. It's like you go out and when opening day rolls around, everybody's going to think World Series. That's what you're supposed to do. You have to. Now, we'll see where this team is at the trade deadline, and that's the key for me. What happens at the trade deadline? Will they pull the trigger if they need to, or will they do like they usually do and sit back and see what happens? But that's going to be an interesting year.
Yeah, that is my number one complaint, I would say, of that. You can say what you want about spending more money, less money, whatever. I mean, that's the budget is what it is. They are risk averse, and that drives me crazy. 2023, they're in first place at the trade deadline. They go out and make one trade for Sam Moll. Sam Moll's been a fantastic pitcher in a Cincinnati Reds 100%. Uniform.
Yeah,
he's a middle reliever.
Yeah,
you don't go out and make their acquisitions that they're holding on, they value their own farm hands so much more, and they don't want to get into any bad contracts, and it's frustrating. But you try to temper hopes and aspirations with reality of where they are. So. Because
that's what the game is. This is the game. It is what it is until something changes, and we'll see in 2027. We'll see. But I don't know. I again, which is why I tell everybody on Twitter, I live in the past for a reason, man. I get to dive into the world of Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, and Jim Morgan, and George Foster, and Ken Griffey. I get to live in the shadows of Ed Roush and all of those guys, the Ted Klasiewskis of the world. I don't have to worry about the modern game because they pay me. Yes, the Reds pay me well, but I don't have to worry about. I can kick back, drink a beer, and watch the game, and not have to worry
stress-free.
About it. I'm going to be 100%. But I want them to win. I'm a fan. I always will be. But I am. If they lose 10-0, I get to go back and work on some Johnny Bench footage. It's great.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about baseball especially football, is you play 10 baseball games to one NFL game. The Reds lose a game. I mean, even if the Reds are having a good season, they lose one game. I'm going to be annoyed with it for about 15 minutes. I'm going to go to the fridge and get a drink or a bite to eat, and then I'm going to change the channel and watch something else, and we're good. Bengals lose. If they lose a nail biter, the rest of my
you got a week.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
well, the
You
rest
get
of
to
your
stew
week.
on it. Yeah, exactly. You get to
Yeah,
stew
for the
on it
next
and go,
week.
why did they do this? Like, yeah, now that's
Yep.
Hunter Green's pitching tomorrow. We're good.
Yep.
All right. Wrapping up our sports conversation here. Again, as at Joe's Tavern, we're not just about sports. We're also talking pop culture, entertainment, music, movies, sports, or music, movies, and TV. Things that entertain me. If they don't entertain you, well, that's your own fault. So, Perusing Cam's profile, I saw he is a huge Beatles fan, and I love the Beatles. And so I thought it'd be fun for us to compare our top 5 and bottom 5 Beatles songs of all time. Number one, I assume they're probably your favorite band of all time, right? I see there's an Abbey Road sign literally above your head.
Yeah, literally. And we're not going to talk about how I got that sign in 1992 in Greater Detroit. The statute of limitations has probably passed, but let's just say that ended up in the car after a long night at some concert, and we said, "There's Abbey Road, let's get it!" And there it is.
I think for minor vandalism, something whatever that would be considered, 33 years. Yeah, I think you're good. You might have access to showing up at your door. We'll see, but
yeah.
But they're one of my favorites. I'm Pearl Jam's my favorite band, but they are the most impactful band ever. They were only around for 10 years, put out 200 songs, 10 albums. I don't know how many actual EPs that they put out, but
then they won the Grammy a couple weeks ago, and they've been broke up for 50 plus years. What's that?
55 years later. Impact is undeniable across every single genre. I mean, you look at just the songwriting between Lennon and Paul McCartney. It's legendary, whether you like the song or not. The structure and they created the formula for a pop song. Never mind that their music literally touched every genre in and of itself. They even tried to dabble into early heavy metal with Helter Skelter, folk songs, and I mean, even like the Indian influences that came in when when they went to India in 67, 68 or somewhere around there.
Right. Correct.
So,
yeah.
You can't deny who they are.
Right. And I didn't grow up I was born 4 years after they broke up. Right. So I came to the Beatles because I had parents that had a eclectic, and I mean eclectic record collection. And then kids, when I say record, I mean vinyl record. I had the access to all of their albums, and I mean, I would pick up I remember, I can tell you exactly. I'm in the music room in our old house here, and just a couple blocks down that way, and I picked up Sgt. Pepper, and I'm like, what is this? Who's these crazy people? Who's in the band? Because there's like 100 people in here. Didn't have a clue. You put it on and you're blown away. And then my dad gives me this album that's got nothing on it, but it's white. And he's like, put this on. I'm like, I thought it was two completely different groups. I had no idea that it was the same group. And that is when I discovered, oh my, this is what it's about. Music for the creation purposes. It wasn't until I was 9-10 years old later when I found out that they had She Loves You, yeah. And then they were the teeny bopper, and they get that, but then they completely go a different direction. To me, and you're 100% right, it is the greatest pop culture group in the history of the world. They changed fashion, music, movies, Hard Day's Night Help.
Yep.
Everything they touched was gold, and they created what we know today. Now it's gone south, obviously, for many, many reasons, and it's not their fault. I mean, they set the template. We just chose to go a different route with it. But every genre, you cannot. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody that is not a fan of the Beatles or has been touched by the Beatles music, whether they are 4 years old or 80 years old. So not too many things can span that whole gap. And it's just, I've been so, lucky to experience that at my age with a brother, my younger brother, who's a couple years younger than me. His nickname in college was Beatles. So that tells you he's more addicted than I am. I'm a Beatles fan. He's a Beatles fanatic. So having him by my side through all of those years, kind of dissecting everything was, how cool was that?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, my parents always had oldies 103.5 on the radio. So I grew up with Beatles in the background, and I liked some of this stuff. It was 94 when they did the Beatles anthology on ABC.
Yeah. Right.
That brought him back, and I got introduced to more and more, a lot of the more psychedelic stuff that you didn't hear on the radio.
Right.
And got more and more into it. And then my wife was, especially when we started dating 25 years ago. Wow, that's a long time. I pity her. She's a saint for dealing with me for this long, but she was into them a lot more and introduced a lot more of their catalog to me. And it's again, like you said, just the breadth, where they were in the beginning as just this kind of bubblegum pop band, with the mop tops and Love Me Do and songs like that, and then you hear their stuff on Abbey Road, or and hearing just how far they've come along just as musicians, and never mind the songwriting quality and things like that. So it's definitely an awesome place to and at least a fun conversation to have. So
the one thing that I will say is that I, like you listen to all those things and in the background, but I also had all those albums at my disposal. Original copies of all those albums are right there. And I'm listening to all this stuff. But it wasn't until I was in high school that my brother discovered, he said, hey, they're going to have this show. At the time I was living in Detroit, the suburbs of Detroit. And what the oldie station there had this show on called the Beatle Boots. I'm like, Beatle Boots? It was 15 minutes every Wednesday night or whatever. So we would race home like it was like we were living in the 30s and we were trying to catch a radio serial like it's the Christmas Story. And we got to have our Ovaltine. We run up to the bedroom, we turn the radio on, and it's this 15-minute show. And they played, again, before copyright would really nail you now. You couldn't do that today. But they would play these bootlegs by a guy named Dr. X. That was his mystery DJ name. And he would play Take 5 of Let It Be and, She Loves You, Take 4. You had all these, you're like, what? This was at the time when bootleg CDs started to become prevalent. So we had, of course, being in Detroit, you had this great record store where if you went to the back room, you could get all these great things. My brother started working at Boston Market, and he would, make $300 or whatever a week. He'd spend $200 on CDs, and because they were $30 a piece back then.
Sure.
I mean, that was crazy, but we would listen to that all day on weekends, just cranking those bootlegs. Then we couldn't wait for the next episode of Beatle Boots, and that kind of opened things up. And it helped me as a musician, right? That's how I really started to be a musician that had any kind of substance, was by listening to not just all of the hits, but deep diving into all of the other stuff that they had done. And of course, their solo work later. So, and again, having a brother to experience that with, it was a game changer for me as far as my musical creation process.
Now you've had the benefit of kind of seeing my, at least being able to see my my list, because they're on the notes and everything I sent over. But I'll let you go ahead and throw out your top.
I'm going to blow your mind with this. No, I thought about this, and I had a list. I took that list and I crumbled it up and I threw it in the garbage can, because here's what I did. I said I couldn't do it, man. I was spending too much time. I'm like, I can't do that. 5. I couldn't do it. So you know what I did? My favorite Beatles song, the White Album. And here's why.
A little bit.
I 100% cheated. Dock points for me on this episode. Please do. I deserve it. I was going through and I saw that 4 out of the 5 were on the White Album. But I don't want to take that off. But the first song I ever learned to play on guitar, I took out the White Album. I'm 8 years old. I put it on, and it happens to be the side where Birthday leads it off on the vinyl. That's how it would work. You'd have side. I put it on Birthdays. I grabbed my dad's 1968 Gibson from under the bed, which was forbidden. I untake the case. It's this beautiful red velvet case inside. I know I'm supposed to touch it. I grab it. I put it in my lap. I put Birthday on, and I sat there for 2 hours while he's at work, and I learned to play the riff of Birthday. So if I had to pick a favorite song, I would have to say Birthday, which is odd, right? Who says that? It's just a throwaway song. Because I learned how to play a riff on that, and that opened up the door for everything else I ever did musically in my life, whether it's piano, drums, bass guitar, organ, piano, whatever. I play all those instruments. It was that song, because I learned how to play it on my dad's acoustic, which was too big, and I'm just kind of trying to figure it out. But listen to that album. because then you go from, all of the other Bungalow Bill, what? Helter Skelter. What the hell is this one group? This is like a compilation album, right? So I am obsessed, and you can't see it's in the back of my room here. I have my dad's copy of the White Album framed because it's the one I listened to as a kid. It's obviously scratched.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, yeah.
So I've got the album and the covers all ripped, but it's stained and it's numbered. And it's his that he got at Kmart in 1968. And I have it on my wall. So it's always with me wherever I go. But yeah, the White Album, Alex, for 200.
That's, and it's hard to even compare album to album, but that's probably my favorite album.
Yeah. But your list is fantastic. I'm proud of you for doing that. That was good, man.
It does have one of my least favorite songs, but we'll go to my top 5 first. Honorable mention, Eleanor Rigby. It's just the tale that it tells, that the story that it weaves, it is so incredibly visceral.
Right, with nobody else on it, right? Strings and Paul. What?
Yeah, exactly. Such a simple song, and you can notice something with a lot of my choices. They're more simple songs, but I mean, you're viscerally, you're there in the cemetery, with Father Mackenzie, and wiping the dirt off his hands, and it just, I think it's just a cool, just little kind of piece of throwaway piece of life about somebody who was irrelevant, more or less, but just right. Interesting little 3-minute story and biography of this person.
Right.
Number 5, going with something, and that's probably the greatest love song ever.
Absolutely.
And just fantastic, and again, simple. Ringo, it's kind of a simple drum beat, and it just a beautiful, beautiful song.
My parents' wedding song, and then my wedding song for the dance was that.
Yep. That's fantastic. We debated that. We ended up going with Your Song by Elton John because Elton John's her favorite solo artist. So, number 4, In My Life, John waxing poetic about where he grew up, and just the lyrics in it. And again, they weren't even 30 years old when they wrote that song, and I'm in my mid 40s, but just talking about things that are gone and not for the better. And driving through the neighborhood I grew up in, and we had these large woods. I mean, it probably wasn't very large, but to us it was the world. We had trails, like we built forts and tree houses. We rode our bikes. There's a little creek, and those have been raised, and there's now subdivision right where they were. So it's the older I get, the more kind of Again, this is someone who was in his mid 20s when he wrote this song. Like just the songwriting ability of them. Number 3, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away.
Yes.
We're cheating a little bit because the Beatles, Pearl Jam's cover, I don't know if it's Pearl Jam or Eddie Vedder, did just an amazing cover of this song.
Yes.
Obviously I preferential to the Pearl Jam one because they're my favorite band, but again, just relatively simple, straightforward song, but very beautiful, poignant lyrics. Number 2, While My Guitar Gently Sleeps, which is just a epic song. So many different parts. Have you seen, and I'm sure it's been around, especially after Prince passed, there was a concert that it was, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, Dhani Harrison. I can't remember. I think Ringo was on one of the drum kits, and Prince played guitar on it, and they covered that song, and just a fantastic, awesome song. I really don't know what it's about, what Sweeping the Floor has to do with anything about a sleeping guitar, but it's just such a cool sounding song.
Yeah, and Prince doing that solo. I mean, you could see the other musicians around him who are all legends.
They've got these huge smiling.
Yeah, they're like,
ear to ear.
We're in the presence of something unbelievable right now. Let's just take a step back. It was so cool.
Yeah. My number 1 favorite song, and it's legitimately probably one of the most simple songs that in their entire catalog, and I love her. I mean, I think Ringo does plays percussion on the back of a
knockers.
Drum. But okay, but just a very simple song. Paul double tracking the vocals. The effects of it sounds awesome. It sounds almost like it's a harmony instead of just just putting Paul's voice on top of itself. But
when it comes out, you would never heard anything like it. just like most of their stuff. When that came out, there was no template. There was no like they were copying. Like today, if a artist comes out with something, you're going to hear 85 same versions of that song with different lyrics because there's like 5 producers in the world right now, right? And they all make the same music. That wasn't the case back then. It was so individual, and every group had their sound, but they also dabbled in everything because they were always trying to outdo each other. Which is why I'm a fan of the Beach Boys, is for that reason, because they experimented and there was that competition. You don't have that now because everything's sterile and the same. And yes, I'm an old man. Get off my cloud. Right. But there is this thing where just think about the unbelievable creative. Whatever that aura was in the 60s, are you kidding me? The Beatles, the Stones, Hendrix, what?
Literal uncharted waters. I mean, they could create their own path because rock and roll obviously it started as, it evolved from blues in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
As a template, as a, the path was wide open. I mean, you're looking at a huge open, field, and you're the one who gets to mow it or to lay the asphalt.
Absolutely.
And you brought up the Beach Boys. Never had records, never had albums, actual vinyl growing up. My parents had a handful. None of them were that great. I think my dad had some Steppenwolf. I don't know, my mom had some probably poppy, maybe Neil Diamond or something like that. But a few years ago, I decided I want to start collecting vinyl. I got a turntable. The very first album I purchased was Pet Sounds.
Nice. Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's what pushed the Beatles. Right. The Beatles were the most popular band, of all time. Their popularity was probably even larger than Taylor Swift's is today because there was fewer,
right.
And they came out and I don't want to say sucker punch, but I mean they kind of punched the Beatles in the mouth. Musically,
the musicianship of them, right? Because think about it,
the production value.
Absolutely, because the Beach Boys were all trained musicians, and they had to go through the rigors of music. The Beatles, not one of them could read music,
right?
Not one of them. They did things by feel, by surrounding themselves with people that could translate what they were thinking and putting on paper. George Martin, their producer, genius for being able to take that and harness it. So it was a collaborative effort. But the Beach Boys and Beatles, that rivalry in the 60s, I mean, Pet Sounds, Pepper, Revolver, just the back-to-back punches of those, you'll never see it again. You'll never see that again. I mean, it's just because there's no need to, right? Today, you don't need to do that. You don't have to pay your dues today. You put yourself on YouTube and you could be, you have 1 million views and you're getting a record deal, whatever a record deal means these days. I don't even know what that means today, but there's just something about, and again, the less you have to work with, and I do, which is why I do the films the way I do. I have right now, you probably can see, I've got these 16 millimeter films that I have to transfer these things because some of the stuff's never been seen before, right? Because who has a projector sitting around, right?
Sure.
I have to transfer these and digitize them for my films because there's a gold mine of stuff in here that nobody knows about.
Sure.
It's not the hits. It's just there's this gold mine there's a shot in the crowd of some girl smoking a cigarette in Riverfront Stadium. I'm going to put that in my doc because it's amazing. What?
It's interesting.
Just a great shot.
Exactly.
100%. And doing it that way, going and doing the work is what the Beatles, Beach Boys, and those bands of the 60s did because they had to define what they wanted to be remembered as. They had to make their own path, like you said. Today, there's nothing left to do except how you look, right? What your style is, how you talk. It's just a different thing, and I think that's problematic because if you don't do the hard work, you don't appreciate it, right?
Sure.
You don't appreciate how it is, and that goes to anything: sports, pop culture, movies, music. But I love the fact that there are artists today that do embrace that. You're starting to see it, like you said. You're collecting vinyl again.
Yeah,
of course, right? It's coming back. Things go in cycles. History rhymes, right? It doesn't repeat itself. History rhymes. So,
it would be nice if people in certain capital city in America would realize
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's all I'm going to mention.
Okay.
That being said, we brought up Pet Sounds. favorite song off that is God Only Knows. Just again,
Yes,
another simple,
absolutely.
just a beautiful, amazing song. I just had to
Just
throw
what
that out
incredible,
there.
incredible vocals, incredible song, incredible musicianship.
Very personal.
Yeah,
Just how personal the song is.
right,
And I love
right.
personal, like very introspective, almost even
Well, yeah,
biographical songs.
your list proves
Yeah.
that, right? You
Yeah.
really went for, the story songs. I mean, and how you can feel the pain or the happiness, whatever the case may be, in the singer or the songwriter's voice, because it's so personal to them. And there's nothing greater in the world to me than an artist that shows their heart on their sleeve, and you can tell when somebody's faking it. And
absolutely,
a lot of that happens today, and you don't get the John Lennons or the Brian Wilsons of the world anymore.
Yeah, and that's mentioned Taylor Swift. She's one of the few musicians that I give literally every, like, is she omnipresent? Yeah. Do I get annoyed seeing her at a football game? Yeah, because I want to watch the game. I don't want to see people in the stands.
I get it.
She's been writing her own songs, playing her own music since she's a teenager.
Right.
I mean, this is someone who busts her ass and is prodigious. The amount of music that she puts out, and critically acclaimed too. I don't, I don't listen to it, so I can't really compare it. But it's not like she's just throwing out these kind of crappy songs that are just that she's putting out because they make money. Like, these are legitimate songs that are introspective and and are good quality. So I will give her that. But with the good comes the bad. Can you even do a bottom five?
I couldn't. Okay. I saw your list, and when I was reading your list, I'm like, I could see that. See that. But I'm so, what's the word? I've been invested for so long, all of my life, since I was 7 or 8 when I first heard them, that I've listened to them so much that I can't bring myself to pick a list of that. It's like,
you don't even want to associate it with something bad.
Right. And it's like, is the inner light, am I going to skip that if I'm listening to Pepper and it's nighttime?
Oh, absolutely not.
I'm going to skip
fantastic.
That.
Like just more just kind of ethereal, just kind of as just something to kind of lose yourself into. That
100%. There are songs like that for me of the Beatles, but it's not that I don't like them. It's just like, I'm not really, when I listen to an Beatles album, will I skip? But there are songs I'm not really in the mood for that. Like you said, like there's that whole, aura of it. It's just not, I'm not ready for that. Give me something a little bit more punchy. And that's the great thing about the Beatles, is that if you don't want to hear one sound, there's something else down here that you are going to get. Whether you're happy, sad, whatever your mood is, you're going to find a Beatles song that's going to fit that mood 9 times out of 10.
You're not going to have to press skip twice.
100%. You are absolutely right. 100%.
I will go through.
There's a little,
okay, and there's a little bit of a theme between them that's not hard to pick out. Number 5, Drive My Car. Number 4, When I'm 64. Yellow Submarine, Octopus's Garden, and Obla Di Obla Da. 3 of them are what John Lennon would call granny shit from Paul McCartney.
Yes, 100%.
Like Obla Di Obla. Like it's. I mean, it's. I mean, I kind of contradicted myself because I said I love songs that have kind of a story behind it, but it's just so
the shtick,
almost overly bouncy and poppy and just generic sounding. Yeah, that's what When I'm 64 and Drive My Car. Like it almost those. I mean, I think these were all singles, weren't they? But they almost feel like just kind of B-sides, just added to fill out the runtime.
Yes, they weren't. Well, and that's the thing that John always hated, is because those are the songs that Paul worked on the most, right? He spent hours doing Obla Di Obla Da, where they were just like, he would show up drunk and just bang on the piano. I'm tired of doing it.
I love the piano at the beginning. And it's got a cool, like, kind of groove to it, but
I completely understand your list. Yeah, I do. I understand your list completely.
And the other, Ringo Starr is one of the greatest influential drummers. In terms of like, it's almost, he gets forgotten about, and I rarely ever mention him when I talk about my favorite drummers. But in terms, I mean, he's a human metronome. I mean, he's so good, you forget him. And it's not like Lars Ulrich from Metallica, where you're like, this guy isn't good. It'd be so much better if they had someone else. No, but Ringo's so good behind the kit. He's not that great. Now, his single stuff, he had some decent songs when he was solo, but like Octopus's Garden and Yellow Submarine, like they're just kind of goofy.
Just give him the song and the album. Yeah, let him do his thing. It was yeah. But that's why you make a great point about him being a great drummer. Is I think recently when the Let It Be doc came out, and you got to see him sit down as they're working out a song, and he just jumps right in, like you said, the metronome. Just it's unbelievable.
Pick up a beat immediately, without even having anything in front of him. Yeah.
Right, and they never. You would hardly ever hear a Beatles say, "No, I want the song to go like this." If Paul grabbed the bass and John had a guitar or George had a guitar, they were doing a riff. Yeah. He's found that groove, and it rarely changed for the final product. He knew what he wanted, and the Beatles. That's a Ringo drum. That's it. And how many times do you get that? Like, it's just so rare.
Just his basic drum fills, and it isn't even until Abbey Road where he actually gets a little bit of a solo,
right? Some love,
in the medley.
And he didn't want to do it, yeah,
and they didn't do a ton of guitar solos or anything outside of While My Guitar Gently, maybe like Helter Skelter, you get a little bit of a riff at the beginning, but they didn't. But it was almost like the beginning of punk music, because punk music isn't. There's no, it's straight punchy right to the point. Like you get to the song, no solos, and it's like almost like you can see how that impressed upon punk, as we talk about them reaching across so many genres and everything. So
right, absolutely.
So anyway, that pretty much wraps up. We went a lot longer. It was having so much fun in this conversation, a lot longer than I expected.
And I should have warned you, my friend. I should have warned you. When I do podcasts and I do talks or whatever, I usually preface by telling people, shut me up when it's time to shut me up, because I will talk about everything. So
I'm the exact same way. So it's, we're leaning into each other. This would be a lot better conversation, like face to face, like at an actual, like
at a tavern.
Actual, exactly. Not just Joe's Tavern. So,
but I'm looking forward to coming back on your show soon when I have some more stuff about the Big Red Machine film coming out later this year that I can kind of share with you, and we can talk about that. I think you'll enjoy some of this stuff, and we'll be able to tell your audience a little bit more about what's going to happen. It's going to be fun, man. I'm really looking forward to it. And it kind of takes away from opening day for me a little bit, because I'm killing myself to get the stuff done for the Reds. And then when baseball season starts, I'm like, I've got to kind of decompress, because I know I've got a summer of films to finish. So it's going to be weird for me to be like, oh yeah, the Reds are going to go to the game. I got to work 8 hours on this thing, and I can't. But hopefully we're going to do I'm trying to set up a 70s night at the ballpark where we're going to try to get tickets and I did one for the 40s a few years ago, and it turned out pretty great. We had a 40s night, but I'm going to try to do a 70s night this year in honor of the Big Red Machine and the 50th anniversary. So I'll keep you posted on that. Get your mutton chops ready, and your your newsboy hat, your laser shoot. Get that ready, man.
Send it to the dry cleaner. See, and that's what's awesome is you've got this coming out, and then Chad Dawson and Chris Garber, who did the Big 50. The Reds, they're coming out with an updated edition of that. I'm not sure when Chad is. I've kind of thought Chad's kind of my mentor. He had me on for the first podcast I've ever been on where we talked about baseball movies.
Nice.
And he's the he's the genesis of the Riverfront that I did the Bengals show. So he and his brother allowed me to flop my gums for an hour plus every week talking sports. So
incredible guys. Shout out to the Dotsons, by the way. Good guys. Yeah. Good guys. Yes,
exactly. Again, and Cam, I really appreciate. I know you've got a ton going on with with all the filmmaking and everything. This made it special just being my premiere episode. Someone who I appreciate and first your wit on social media, which is we're similar. I'm going to say that I think you can tell we have similar points of views.
Careful, I get myself in trouble on
points
there.
Of views. I could be talking sports, music, whatever. We're just talking similar.
I get you.
Points of views. I mean,
you're from the other side of
you're from the other side of the river.
That's true. I'm a Kentucky boy at heart, my friend.
I lived in Florida for 2 years. I don't know if I get my bluegrass card or not. That's actually where my son was born. We lived in Kentucky when he was born. So
okay, there you go. Kentucky blood. I like it.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to seeing where my show's going in the future. If you guys that are watching, and hopefully this reaches out, I'm just starting up. I don't have a ton of subscribers on anything, but if you guys watch it, rate it 5 stars. Give it a nice rating. Give me a comment on YouTube or something like that. If you don't, please, send me an email. Send JoesTavernShow@gmail.com. Let me know what don't you like. Should I shut my mouth? Should there be less of me up there? Should there be more of the guests? Let me know. Again, I'm doing this because because I want to entertain people. I think I have a different perspective, and I like having, again, long form conversations and like I did talking, about X's and O's and stuff like that, talking sports, and that's fine. But it's better to have, to talk, at least from my perspective, at least from my taste. I like talking about stories and having conversations instead of, well, the Bengals need to run more of this offense, or what are they doing? When they face a blitz, why can't Cordell Volson handle a stunt? Things like that. Like this is just a much more fun format for me. So again, like, I appreciate and will happily take all the feedback you guys can have, positive, negative, whatever. I've got thick skin. I've got kids. Kids can be really mean when they're at a certain age. Like, they have no filters and they're blunt. So we will be back here next week with another guest. I'm working a couple things out here, but what I'm going to do on a weekly basis, I'm going to leave you with a quote of the week. And considering we talked the Beatles, I'm going to use John Lennon here quote. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a German, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. So until next week, everyone take care.